Thank you all. Folks still filing in, and we will get started. Particularly enjoyed the session this morning. It's very relevant. I think I found one of my favorite quotes, though. I was going to say it's, if all these committees are going to make the decisions, then why do you need a CIO? I think that's particularly applicable in the public sector space. I wrote that one down. Take that one home. Welcome back. Hope you had some coffee. We're able to visit. Our Twitter fall is going good. Please tweet. We've been tracking those through the morning. Okay. So as folks come on back in, we're going to get your keypads. We're going to do a couple of questions this morning before we get started on our FirstNet panel. Okay? Do the policymakers and budget directors in your state understand that the nationwide public safety broadband network might have fiscal impacts through construction and ongoing network operations? This is for everyone. Okay. That's a long question. Read it good. Hoping for a split between A and B. Oh, okay. Interesting. 50% are in that bad part of C and D. Okay, another question. When you woke up this morning, what was your top pain point? And this cannot be related to anything that might have happened last evening. Your top pain point.
I'm just a lonely boy, lonely and blue. I'm all alone.
Okay. Lots of things cause pain. It's pretty evenly spread out. Okay, we're going to transition to our next panel. I think it's going to be a good one. I have the great pleasure of introducing Daryl Ackley, who co-chaired our broadband working group with me this year and is the CIO of New Mexico, and he's going to be facilitating our next panel. Please join me in welcoming Daryl.
Well, good morning, everyone. Hopefully everyone's having a fantastic conference, and I'm not used to hearing myself this loud. This is a little bit disconcerting, so bear with me. I guess I'll say a few opening remarks, and we'll invite the panel to come up, and we'll get started. Hopefully this will be, I've had a lot of questions, a lot of discussion about the FirstNet issue throughout the conference, and so I'm hoping we'll get some good dialogue, some good questions, but also an opportunity for there to be some good information presented by our guests this morning that will hopefully help answer the question as well as move the discussion along. So the presentation this morning is on, it's basically public safety, FirstNet, broadband, and the role of the state CIO. A little bit of background here. Following the events of 9/11 and then some of the after action that took place of there, one of the key findings had to do with public safety communications, interoperability, the ability of first responders to be able to interact with cross disciplines and with folks from other jurisdictions. And in one of the specific recommendations of the 9/11 Commission report had to do with making additional spectrum available for public safety communications officials to have in building a better nationwide capability for that first response in a coordinated effort. In the decade that followed the release of that report, there really was a very concerted effort that some of you are probably very familiar with in terms of developing an apparatus around increasing interoperable communications at the state level, much of that through the Homeland Security Department that was created following the events of 9/11, but also really helping establish positions within states to increase interoperable communication, manage things like frequency plans, and really begin doing joint exercises to prepare and help get the nation to that next level of preparedness. But also during the past decade, there's been a lot of movement towards specifically spot of spectrum in the 700 megahertz range, and getting that. How many of you remember the old UHF dials on your televisions, right? Yeah, okay, good. Before it was like the guide where you brought it up. Well, so as part of the transition to digital broadcasting for television, a lot of that spectrum was freed up when those previous channels were released, and it's prime spectrum for public safety. So as part of the effort to increase interoperable communications in the states, there were a concerted effort by a number of folks working to have early builder deployments and in this spectrum, but not just for land mobile radio, which is the traditional mode of communication, right, for public safety officials, but to move into digital broadband, to move into something that would allow for ubiquitous data transformation, sharing, and communication among public safety officials. A lot of, if you're familiar with the way that your various first responders interact, a lot of times they're using, radio packet technologies or other forms of cellular modem. The idea here was to actually have a set of spectrum set aside that would be dedicated to developing this. And through the efforts of many folks, some of whom are in this room, there was a Spectrum Act that was passed in February, in early 2012, that basically codified the efforts of what had been developmental on behalf of a number of people who were trying to develop these efforts, in regional or local or state partnerships, the so-called early builders, and through the broadband grants through the NTIA. So this Spectrum Act created a word that I'm sure you've heard a lot lately, or created a term called FirstNet, right? Who's heard of FirstNet? Let's all raise our hands. Hey, very good. I can't see them because of the lights, but I'm assuming you all raised your hands. So FirstNet was created with the goal of actually developing this nationwide, really, public safety broadband network within that spectrum. And another aspect of that act was allocating the additional D block of the 700 megahertz spectrum, given a little bit more than 20 megahertz of spectrum, making that available, which is huge. This is, if you're a spectrum nerd like I've become, this is very valuable spectrum in terms of being able to get this type of communication deployed. But with that came a number of ramifications. For one, I don't know how many of you have, why don't we go to an ARS question real quick so I break up myself from talking. Let's cue one up here, maybe. Oh, this wasn't one I thought, my bad. Okay, so let me ask this question. As you are doing statewide planning, are you incorporating, this is for our state members only, are you incorporating public safety broadband into those plans? Yes, as part of official responsibility and portfolio. B, yes, but without official responsibility and portfolio because you think it's important. C, no, public safety communications are not under my purview. D, thinking about it. And E, who has time for statewide planning? So let's all ring in here.
Pretty woman walking down the street, pretty woman, the kind I like to meet.
And the answer is, that's impressive. So hey, good job, Nasio. Let's all, right? This is fantastic, and I think this is exactly what we're here today to discuss. As I've learned, a lot of states have very different models for interacting with their public safety communications officials. Some of us have radio responsibilities, some of us don't, some of us provide planning, some of us are involved in that. And so that question was oriented around exactly teeing up the panel here today. If you're familiar, the idea behind the National Public Broadband Network is LTE, cellular technology, right? So operating devices in that with an evolving packet core. And essentially, it's an IP-based technology, which is where CIOs start to say, I might need to be involved in this, especially if this is going to require resources and allocation of infrastructure that I have in my state. And not always, but sometimes IT folks and public safety folks don't always see eye to eye. Maybe I'm the only one that's experienced that. No? Okay. Sometimes it's the unique snowflake versus enterprise provider issue, right? I need responsiveness, that sort of thing. We, Brenda and Dave Gustafson and I were at APCO to participate in some discussions there. One of the things we noticed as we walked around the vendor, the vendor mall there that was bigger than I think my home city, was that probably 70% of the equipment that was on display by vendors was not land mobile radio. It was things like secure packet gateways that could go into vehicles. And Brenda and I looked and said, this is why the CIOs need to be involved in this, right? It really is the confluence of these two paradigms and an emerging thing. And the idea is that we have all the technology for this to be Star Trek, right? We have devices, we have voice communication. Now let's look at how we build out the network that can support that. So I've gone on way too long. I'm going to go ahead and ask our panelists to come up and join me. Here, I'll say a few brief introductions, and then they've got some presentations they're going to make, and then we'll get into your questions. So without further ado, I think, so Chief Johnson is here, chief of the, what was it?
Universe.
The universe.
World? The universe, okay.
Yeah, I've been scaled back.
Yeah. Chief Johnson is here. Some of you may know Chief Johnson, extensive public safety experience, primarily in fire in the state of Oregon, but also a lot of experience at local, national, even international levels, serving as the chair for the International Association of Fire Chiefs, quite a bit of extensive work with SAFECOM, if you're familiar with that, and now serving as a member of the FirstNet board, appointed with the creation of that board. So we're glad to have the chief here with us this morning. I probably don't need to introduce Mr. Fletcher, of course. I think a superhero of NASIO, right? And now with the NTIA, he's heading up the Office of Public Safety Communications, overseeing the SLIGP grants and the program that's designed to help get the coordination among the states going. But former CIO of the state of Utah, as well as the Department of Education, I believe. Very good. And then, of course, Ms. Decker. I call Ms. Decker has been my coach and has talked me out of a number of jams and probably kept me from going insane. So, but everyone, of course, past president Brenda Decker. Now, what I think a lot of you may not know, Brenda served on the panel that created the interoperability report on FirstNet that went into the FCC following the passage of the Spectrum Act, and like me, has responsibility for land mobile radio communications. So that's our panel. I know, Steve, you had a few things you wanted to say, and then we'll do a question, and then we'll jump into the presentations.
And I just wanted to say real quickly that I'll not speak for Brenda, but Jeff and I are both very happy to be here. As you know, the federal government is, as Brenda previously described, it's shut down right now. As a result, there isn't a lot of travel that is taking place within government. As a matter of fact, FirstNet was supposed to have a board meeting this week, and when the chairman went to Department of Commerce and asked them whether they would be allowed to travel, they said no. You can have the board meeting, but it's got to be via phone. No travel will take place during the shutdown. So when Jeff and I were talking about, well, we got this NASIO conference that we need to attend. I drew the short straw, and I had to go talk to the secretary to pitch this for how important it was for FirstNet, and to be able to meet with all the CIOs of all the 50 states and most of the territories. So I went up and I pitched that, and the secretary said, okay, you and Jeff can travel, but let the let the folks know at NASCIO that they are really important people and we need to have them as our partners as we go forward. And I thought that was excellent for her to be able to understand and to be able to allow that to go. So both Jeff and I are very excited to be here, and thank you for this opportunity.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you as well. Let's go to an automated response question, and then we'll jump into some presentation. So, speaking of and I'll just say SLIGP because that's how we know the state local grant process. So how involved are you? Again, another question for our state members. So through your office of the CIO, are you administering and managing the grant? B, are you involved with the grant team? C, peripherally involved? Or D, not involved at all? So let's all cast our votes. There's the music, thank goodness. Survey says, okay, this scales, I think, with the answer that we just saw, but there's still some non-involvement, and hopefully the presentations that you're about to hear from Chief Johnson and from Mr. Fletcher will provide some background, hopefully some coherence for some of you who have been asking some questions about what this means, and so we'll invite them up to speak, and then after that we'll take some questions. So, Chief?
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
I can't tell you how happy I am to be talking to CIOs as a guy that has spent 35 years chopping holes, spraying water, and shocking people. It's good to talk to a conference where you don't need a lot of pictures with flames and stuff like that on them. Lately, I've been talking to a lot of cops, so I have to use small words. So here I am in front of CIOs. You're going to get the big words, you're going to get the big picture, and hopefully we're going to have a great exchange about what FirstNet is. I want to tell you, the most criticism I've ever taken in this communications arena occurred in Renton, Virginia, when I was in front of a bunch of colleagues, a room about 3 times this size filled with cops and firefighters. I was one of the presenters. This is shortly after the legislation passed, and I happened to make this kind of an audacious and offensive statement when I said, unlike any time in our history as public safety responders, the CIO will become a more prominent figure in every decision we make. In fact, the CIO will become the hub of every communications decision we make in public safety. And I'm telling you what, the number of people that lined up to beat me in the aisle was unbelievable. They couldn't believe I would say that, but here's what they missed. There used to be radio people, and then there were IT network people. And today, it's all one. Radio, RF, just become an application writing on a network, and permissioning, right? Permissioning the databases is what's going to make the inevitable difference at the street level for cops, firefighters, and EMTs. That's what's going to make the difference. Whether my colleagues and I agree or not, the reality is there's been this tremendous merge of technology, and RF is a transport modem. So I am pleased to be here. I am pleased to say bravely and confidently that the role of the CIO is critical to cops, firefighters, and paramedics, and the sooner we as an industry learn that, the better off we're going to be. You've got some big decisions to make in terms of how this moves forward, and my goal today is to not appear to be an expert at FirstNet, because right now we're all learning. I know I'm on the board. I know I spent 4 or 5 years on the Hill working on this. But there really, I mean, everything we say, with some exceptions, could change in the next couple of years, and here's why. Has anybody in this room built a nationwide public safety network, LTE? Anybody? That's right, because it's never been done. It's never been done in the world. So all we can do is use the law as a foundation, use the expertise assembled in the 15 board members and the fabulous staff members like Steve and his colleagues. All we can do is to use that expertise in the law as a foundation and impute the path forward. But we're going to get some things wrong, and we're going to have to backtrack occasionally, and we're going to have to morph our perspective because technology changes so quickly, and the evolutions happen at such a pace that I think all I'm saying is, hey, give us a little room here. Give us a little room. We're going to follow a path, but it's not going to be like we're on rails. We're going to wander down a cleanly defined valley. But it's not on rails because it's never been done. And we're going to need just a little bit of room. So let me tell you what we think today. FirstNet exists to serve first responders. That's who we're here to serve. The public safety community. And it's all about the applications and the devices. And our goal is to build a sustainable business model and keep the user fees as low as possible. I want to dispel a myth, right? I spend a lot of time myth busting. I'm going to dispel a myth. FirstNet cannot take your stuff. Can't take your towers, can't take your servers, we can't take your backhaul, we can't take any of it. We don't have the authority and we wouldn't if we could. As we work to construct a nationwide public safety broadband LTE network, as we work to do that, ladies and gentlemen, we may need something you have, but that's something we'll work on together. We will reach terms on that, or we'll find another way to do it. I want to talk briefly about what a nationwide network means. I have spent the better part of my 35 years as the chief, not a chief, the chief. I get command and control. I get incident command. I get it my way, except at home. We understand that this network will not be successful, ladies and gentlemen, if we take a nationwide network and jam it down your throats as this is the way that it operates 24 by 365. That won't work. Here's what it is. It's a nationwide network. It is a pipe that's wireless, and you manage it locally. That's right. It will be local management on a nationwide network. And local management right down to the incident commander who has a comms unit leader that makes decisions about dynamic priority. It's going to happen at that low of a level. Nationwide network, local control. It is going to be permission-based to the applications. And I think one of the biggest challenges you're going to have as a CIO is going to boil down to what databases do you permission to the network and with what restrictions? The management component of your data, I didn't make a mistake there. I said your data, not our data, not FirstNet's data, not the Fed, your data. You permission your data. If there are states that have said to us in our regional meetings, Chief, our data by law cannot be housed outside of our state. Okay, that's fine. That works. And there's laws that say our data can only go to these kind of entities. Okay, that works. You permission your data. We're a pipe. We're a wireless nationwide network. It is going to be about how you share existing applications databases. There's going to have to be some dynamic process built up in our operating center where that can be changed based on need and with the proper permissions. But it is really kind of all about that. It's about getting important information at the street level in a usable fashion that makes us more effective and efficient. It is fascinating the kind of evolution you and I can conjure up here. Let me just say this. There has been less evolution in the public safety world from a technological perspective than in the consumer market. Could we agree on that? Could we agree that today cops and firefighters are pushing to talk and letting up to listen? And if they're doing anything other than that, it's happening on a tablet or a PC or one of these, commercial grade. The evolution of technology is behind in public safety. I hypothesize, I assert, that the reason is there hasn't been gravitas and mass in one area. We've been on six different slices of spectrum. It's all been land mobile radio. It's not high-speed LTE data of any kind. 6 slices of spectrum, 20,000 separate, independently owned and operated land mobile radio networks, digital and analog, 3 to 5 different manufacturers, and we can't figure out why we can't talk. Evolution has been slow because there's been no single point of focus. There's been no gravitas. We are going to see a remarkable evolution in public safety communications and technology and capability brought to the street level as a result of FirstNet. In time, these devices, services, and applications will change the way we operate. I think if I were the CEO of a consulting firm, I would look at what's going on at FirstNet and I'd say, wow, there's a lot of people trying to get a piece of that technical business. The human business is going to be the work. The human lift. When everybody is on a single data network and we have to agree on rules and permissioning and access and priorities and wow, the human component of getting cops, firefighters, and paramedics, all of whom are chiefs who are never wrong, to agree is going to be a phenomenal body of work. And I will tell you, at the state level, it is going to require the CIO. It is going to require leadership at the state level, which washes a framework and an approach onto the locals for figuring out how we're going to do that. Because like it or not, at the county and city level, they have a lot of data and information that would be helpful to you, and you have a lot of data and information to be helpful to them. All of that will be helpful to the users of FirstNet if you so permission it. FirstNet will provide fast access to applications which can be shared broadly. And frankly, as I said before, limited on a credentialed basis and a permission basis. And you see on the screen some of the examples, but I like to point to the shootout of the future. All of us have watched Cops, right? Watch Cops, and you see the sheriff somewhere in the southeast part of the United States walking up from his patrol car to someone they've pulled over. I want you to get this image going because you've seen this. And as he approaches the car, you can see him say something to the driver, and you see a report of gunpowder out of the driver's window. The police officer draws his weapon and begins firing into the vehicle. The person in the vehicle comes out and the shootout is on, and they kind of chase each other around the car shooting. I've seen numerous examples of this, but it's happened. The reason we watch that on TV, ladies and gentlemen, is because somebody pulled the chip out of that camera. What if it's real time? Not someone pulled the chip out later. What if it's real time? What if the camera on the police officer's uniform and the mic on the police officer's uniform automatically runs a voice check against a database? We know who's in that car based on voice print. What if the 4 closest cops, regardless of jurisdiction, automatically are transmitted the video, the audio, the XY location of that police officer? The cameras on the poles on the freeway swing to see the scene. You can see the car camera, the police officer's camera, and you can select between them. The supervisor gets it, the dispatcher gets it. You permission it, rule-based. Anytime the police officer pulls his gun, his nightstick, or his mace, it triggers. Now we know what the car looks like, not just what the license plate said it looked like. Now we know what the perpetrator looks like. Now we know precisely where they are and what's going on. Now you begin to make really smart tactical decisions at the street level. When this says, right, that some of the applications that will be shared, well, we can only begin to imagine the kind of capability that's going to happen at the street level. I want to tell you where we are today. They seated this board of directors about a year ago. There's 15 members of this board, 3 federal, 12 from the community. The community is defined as 6 members from industry. All 6 come from the wireless industry cell phone business. Of the 6 people representing industry, they have worldwide built countrywide deployments of over 30 cell networks worldwide. Tremendous experience. On the public safety side, we've got me as the firefighter. We've got 2 cops, because it takes 2 to think as well as 1 firefighter. We got 1 paramedic. We've got the CIO for the Department of Defense, and we've got Wellington Webb, the former mayor of Denver. Tremendous man. The breadth and depth of experience that sit on that board is astounding. And when you pair that together with the industry experience, I'll tell you, you get some really fantastic dynamics. Well, before you on the screen is what's happening. They seated us about a year ago. We named a general manager in April. We held regional meetings. Many of you were there. With 55 of the 56, I think Guam was the only territory that didn't make it. We held these workshops, 2-day workshops. We issued 10 technical RFIs in July. We appointed a deputy GM and CFO, Government Affairs Director, Ed Parkinson, in late July. We issued spectrum leases to New Mexico and Los Angeles Regional Interoperable System. In August, we continued negotiations on the rest. We approved a 2014 budget and operational plan in our August board meeting, and we introduced the 10 regional outreach structure. So here is the foundation for FirstNet. We know that it's going to take network partners. We know that we've got to work within the mandates and the constructs of the public law. We have got to bring in or reject the BTOP opportunities that we had. I was chair of Oregon's SIEC at the time when Oregon received a waiver. One of 21 states received a waiver. And you know, the context changed from then till now. The context then was we all get a waiver, we all get some BTOP money, and we build our own. And then we plug them into each other. That was the context. The law that created FirstNet changed that context. The context today is we're going to build a single nationwide network. That's what we're going to do, a single nationwide network. But what do you do with the places that have already got some money and made some progress? You know, folks like Daryl in New Mexico, what do you do? Well, that's what the BTOP negotiation's about, is figuring out how not to waste that money and how to make future investments and the evolution of where they are to FirstNet. How do we make that happen? I want to address just kind of another one of those rumor issues, right? Let's talk about opt-out. That's a great term, opt-out. It'd be great if opt-out meant opt-out. It doesn't. There's only 3 actions the 56 states, territories, and commonwealths can take. Let me tell you what they are. Opt-in. FirstNet is going to walk into the office of your governor and drop a plan on the desk of your governor. I didn't say legislature, I said governor. That's what the law says. The day that document, that plan hits the desk of your governor, the governor has 90 days within which to act on that. There are 3 actions your governor can take. They're very simple. Number 1, opt in. Well, listen, we're working with your staff, or soon will be, to know exactly what's in this document. This isn't a surprise. When this hits the desk, we got there together. 90 days. Your governor gets to say, we're in. FirstNet, pop up the wireless umbrella over our state, and we're ready to go. It does not mean that you'll buy a single subscription from FirstNet. Doesn't mean you'll buy one. It doesn't mean that counties will buy one. It doesn't mean that cities will buy one. It doesn't mean you're bound to buy subscription. It means you agree with our plan to deploy a radio access network. Opt in. We build it, we maintain it, we pop it up over your state. Opt in. Silence from the governor at that 90-day mark means exactly the same as we're in. So there's two ways to be in. But now we get to the all-important opt-out. Here's what opt-out means. Opt-out means you're in. I'm not kidding you. Opt-out means you're in, but it means you're going to build the RAN. You're going to build it, you're going to operate it, and you're going to maintain it, but you're required under the federal law to connect to the evolved packet core of FirstNet to meet our technical standards, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's what it means. So if you want to build your own RAN, then you choose to opt out. But my advice to you is, hey, if we're playing poker together, aren't you advantaged if you see our cards before you decide what you're going to do? It's that simple. We're going to drop this plan that we worked on together on your governor's desk. And if that doesn't work for you, you have the choice of opting out and building your own and complying with FirstNet standards, et cetera, et cetera. That's a choice you have. But I think you're advantaged if you see this first before you make any decision. Put the onus on us to deliver that to you. Put the onus on us to meet your needs. That's the challenge. So that's kind of I just went sideways off from BTOP and probably obviated an upcoming slide, but it was a great place to talk about the three options you have before us. We're also going to deploy portable hotspots. There was very likely to be a satellite component of this because there are parts, as Dugan would tell you, there are parts of Oregon where building terrestrial coverage is not very practical. To put up terrestrial coverage in Hell's Canyon, Oregon, which is actually deeper than the Grand Canyon, is not very practical. So we're going to need some kind of a satellite platform. And then lastly, the wireless devices. There's nothing on the street today that it precisely meets our needs, and we're going to have to spec engineer, develop, and manufacture those devices to our expectations. We've also made the decision recently to replicate the 10 FEMA regions. Not all the cities will be precisely the same, but the regions will be the same. FirstNet devices will be rugged, easy to use, and meet public safety requirements. They will be this kind of smart or smarter, but dumb simple when you need it. Push the button to talk. I mean, the last thing you need to do in a shootout is dial a 10-digit number. The last thing I need to do in a smoke-filled building in a basement is to light up my screen and remember whose number to call. I need one-to-many communications, I need group communications, I need off-network performance, I need mission-critical, rugged, reliable performance. That's what mission-critical is. To date, we've issued 11 RFIs. There are 6 more in the works. We hope that you're responding to those RFIs. We issue them for a reason. We issue them because we're listening. We want the best and brightest looking over the horizon, filling in those gaps that we may not see as clearly as you do. And we have, as I say, we have more en route. So in July, we issued the 10 network RFIs. I want to skip down to what we have coming. We're currently reviewing the responses. And then we're going to use market research and RFI responses to develop our acquisition strategy. That is, we're on the front edge of that right now. And then lastly, we're going to design the RFPs. And of course, all that will be a very public process. We continue to collaborate with the states to develop and deliver your network deployment plan. There are some states that are reaching out to us today saying, hey, come over here, we want to talk to you. We're receptive to that. But we're on the front edge of what I will say direct engagement between FirstNet and the states. And there is one primary holdup to that. We're having trouble, very candidly, hiring enough people fast enough that would allow us to engage you in a meaningful fashion. It takes a lot of people to do 56 states and territories simultaneously to engage the level of detail that we need. So we're looking for you to provide input to your state point of contact during consultation. I think it's going to be critical that you make sure you involve the right state, local, and county-wide public safety personnel. They may be association representatives, but you're going to have the right people at the table, and they may not all be with the state. We have to talk in great detail about what local management of the network means, how you activate and deactivate devices, how you access applications and database, how you create priorities on the network, and how you dynamically change those priorities. It's my pleasure, and we're going to make sure we take time for questions, my pleasure to introduce Steve Fletcher, who's the Associate Administrator at the Office of Public Safety Communications. More importantly, here's the real deal. Steve's a state guy. Like myself, he came through the state system and he understands it. So his job is, and he does it well, is to help FirstNet weave with SLGP and to help us find our path through the federal process. So Steve, you've been awesome to work with. It's a pleasure to work with you and my pleasure to introduce you.
So I want to give a couple of brief comments just about the SLGP program. As most of you are aware and have participated in it, this was set up primarily as a support for FirstNet. It was looked at to how do we interact with the states? What is the way in which we can interact with them so that we can partner together, work together in order to put this nationwide network together. So the SLGP grant program was established so that there would be funding to the states so that essentially you could organize yourself. What does that mean? Well, the key part of the grant program is there was established a state point of contact. This was designated by the governor. And it was designated as the person that FirstNet would be coordinating with in order to look at the activities in the state. To this date, we have awarded, I think the numbers are 55 out of 56 states and territories participated, and we have awarded 54 grants to this point in time. There's one state that has some process issues that we are working through. But to this date, everybody except one state has been awarded. And what is this to be used for? What is the activity that's going to go forward? Well, it's really interesting because if you think about it, one of the things that's going to be critical for FirstNet is to understand how many users, potential users, are out there. We've never counted them before. The federal government has never had a need to know how many users were in the states and the locals and the territories and the tribal entities. They've never had that need, nor has the state, unless you were running a statewide network and had that curiosity. It has never been counted. So one of the things that is very critical to FirstNet is to understand how many users there are. So maybe that is the first data point that will be collected as you go out and look at your state and all the participants there. You're going to have to figure out how to organize yourself. How do you coordinate with your cities, your counties, your regional governments, and your tribal governments? How do you do that? And that's what this grant was set up for, so that when they ask for other pieces of data, other understanding about how the first responders work in your state, you will be able to respond. It also gets you in a position so that when, as Jeff said, puts the plan on the desk of the governor, that you will know how you want to participate. You will be able to have that understanding. You will be able to coordinate that activity within your state. And that's really primarily what the SLGP grant program is all about. And so I think that that's the message that we would probably say that you would prepare yourself for. Everybody wants to know what's next. It is to prepare yourself for that decision on how are you going to participate with FirstNet. As the chief said, everybody will be participating. It is a nationwide network. It's now just a matter of defining how that participation is going to go forward. And so with that, we look forward to the interaction with the looking at the grant for how you're going to go forward, how you're going to organize yourself, and we look forward to that. Thank you.
Brenda, I didn't know if you wanted to say a few things from your perspective, or if you wanted to be ready for
I can
questions.
say just a couple things because I'll never pass up that opportunity, you know that.
Yes.
First of all, thank you both for being here. Chief Johnson, I appreciate your comment that, you know, you're very conscientious about states like New Mexico, and your comment about FirstNet doesn't know what to do at this point with states like that. We don't know what to do with Darrell either. I do want to talk about a couple of things that I heard in this presentation that I need to make sure that the people in this room, especially the CIOs, know. Opt-out. Opt-out is one of those terms that you're going to hear, like Chief Johnson said, you're going to hear people over and over again say, well, we're just not going to opt in. We're just going to opt out. Well, this is why the CIOs really, really need to be involved in this process. Opt-out, as the chief said, is not opting out. You're not saying we're not going to do it. What you're saying is we're going to do it ourselves. The little piece of the law that I think we all need to understand is, and I'm not going to quote it exactly, but I'll get it pretty close and they can correct me if I'm wrong. If you opt out and say we're going to build our own network, you have 180 days to put out an RFP and build a network. I don't know about you, but in Nebraska, I can't get the terms and conditions settled in 180 days. So you need to be involved from the start with these discussions so that you really do have a chance if you think your state wants to opt out and build your own network. You've got to be ready to do that because you have got a specific time frame that is legislated in the law. So make sure you're aware of that and you're part of that. How to count your public safety users. I mean, we all think, oh, we know how many cops and police chiefs and EMS people we've got out there. But do you know how many people are involved in public safety and things like your utilities? Those people are going to be part of this network. Do you know how many people need to be involved in public safety that actually work in your school systems and will want to be part of this network? Those are the kinds of counts we're going to have to do, folks. And I mean, get involved. Get with your people that are your single points of contact and make sure you understand that. Education of our people in our states. I can tell you right now, you could poll the Nebraska legislature and there may be 2 people that even have heard the term FirstNet. Does your legislature know what's going on? Your policymakers, make sure they understand what this means to your state. This is a broadband network. This is not just public safety. This is something that's going to affect how you do business in your state. So you need to have your policymakers, your governor needs to understand what's going to happen, your budget officer needs to understand what happened. I don't know about you, but when I got the SLIGP grant, it was like, you got money? What are we doing? You got to get your budget people involved. You need to get your HR people involved because if you're going to support this kind of a network, you may have some costs in HR or at least retraining costs that you're going to get involved. So, and obviously your legislature and your attorney generals, you're going to have agreements that are going to have to be made between the states and FirstNet. The state is going to be leading this. This is the governors that are going to make these decisions. And as we sit and advise our governors, I think we need to be fully aware of all the pieces that we need to get in front of them. So those are my comments.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more. It's one of those things that you'd hate to be surprised with, certainly, when you get asked that question, because it is a very complicated, it's a very complex issue. Let's do our last ARS question before we jump into some QA and interaction with the panel there. So, do you see public safety broadband as a transformational or disruptive technology? This question is for everyone. So, A, yes, the future is Star Trek. B, no, you'll pry radios out of our cold, dead hands. C, it depends on adoption, availability, and cost model. And D, it's too early to tell. So cast your votes. And the answer is okay. C, the majority, depends on adoption, availability, and cost model. And I think that's a pragmatic response from the majority there. I like the Star Trek one just because I'm a nerd. But very interesting, and I think probably speaks to some of the questions that will be asked. So we've got about 30 minutes for interactive question and answer. And I think that I'll start off with one for our panel, and then after that we'll open up to the audience. So my first question for this astute group, august, is how should state CIOs incorporate this planning for FirstNet and public safety broadband in the context of existing land mobile radio and communications programs that they might already be involved in?
Let me take a run at that to start with. First, FirstNet is not intended to replace the land mobile radio networks today. It's not. We don't have the standards built into 3GPP that even define mission criticality to a point that we can manufacture to it. I think it's obvious, right, that if you have a nationwide network with in-building penetration and it's 20 megahertz, a contiguous 700 spectrum, and I think we can all see that technology at some point will be capable of that. It's just we're not there today, and we're not contemplating it in that fashion. So I think it would be a mistake to stop investing in your LMR system today. But I think we can see there will be a point in time where this will be capable of that. I just think there's no utility in trying to predict when that is today, because it's certainly not in the next 5 or 6 years. I think it's a whole different question if 10 years from now you're going to do a wholesale replacement of your LMR. I think my advice to you would be just sit on that one for a couple years, because I think there'll be a lot more finite about FirstNet in 2 years or even in 1 year. But make no mistake, it is not our goal to replace your LMR networks at implementation, which is just a little under 3 years.
And then you would then follow that up with you, if you talk to Chief Johnson, and that's where I get most of my good information, or he tells me it's the best information that's available, is that most first responders, they have their LMR radio, but they also have other devices that they carry with them that are being paid for, that are subscription users, that are almost as and actually maybe more often used than some of their LMR equipment. That equipment, because it is invaluable to the first responders, both voice communication as well as data communication is used on those devices. This will be a network primarily looking at that application, and there is a world of use for that application with the data that is out there, that can be used, that can be brought into the first responders' daily routine, that will help serve the population, help serve the citizens by that increased amount of data at making it more and more available. So that is primarily where they are going to make the biggest impact with the FirstNet network as it goes forward, is in those particular devices that are currently in use today, and it will be enhanced and added on to with the application that are envisioned. So it is really a two-step process as we go forward.
You know, there's just one additional thought. There's a tradition component especially to the police and fire world, right? Very traditional business. I mean, I come out of a business where we still wear animal skins on our heads pressed into the shape of a helmet. I mean, they're leather helmets, and that's just the tradition of our industry. Even when FirstNet produces a device that is LMR-like in its performance, the transition doesn't happen until at the street level, at the lieutenant and captain level. When they have a choice of devices, they always pick their FirstNet device. That's the day it happens. It's not the day FirstNet says it's capable or the CIO says it's capable. It happens when they have the same confidence in the performance of that device that they do today.
Actually, I've been asked by some of our county people already, should we, we've got to replace our LMR. Should we do it or should we wait for FirstNet? And I always tell them that they need to make the investment in their current systems because, quite frankly, well, actually, I tell them they should come on my system first. But the obvious answer is, I think Chief Johnson is right. We're going to be doing that when the systems make that their first choice. But one other thing I think that FirstNet's going to do for all of us, again, back to my hat of the CIO and thinking of technology, is as these devices become more and more deployed in the hands of our first responders, we're going to get started to ask those kinds of things from our county officials. They're going to want to say, I want to have the same kind of technologies that are out there for FirstNet. And so some of us that do provide services to our cities and our counties need to start also thinking in the broader picture and the bigger picture of, okay, as I put something that's that responsive in the hands of my first responder, do I also need to be talking to my city councils and my county boards and saying, what are the applications that we can deploy and expanding our state networks as well? So keep that in mind.
Very good. Okay, yes, let's jump to audience questions.
Yeah, Chris Ibsen from the state of Nevada, and Daryl, very much like you, I'm kind of a looking to the future Trekkie guy. That first question I answered A, and around that answer, my question is, I've heard discussion around data, I've heard discussion around network, I've heard discussion around collaboration. Can you speak to both the architecture, the security, and the shared components of FirstNet? I think this is a tremendous opportunity. And in our earlier discussions, I've seen even the approach being somewhat siloed. Is there a mindset with the federal government, given that it's shut down right now, that this is a tremendous opportunity and that we need enterprise architecture, that we need security in a shared capacity, that we need consolidation and understanding on a global sense?
I'll start very quickly by saying through my participation on NASCIO's behalf with the Public Safety Advisory Committee, the PSAC, at our last meeting, that was a central part of that discussion and that underpinning, but I'll defer to our guests here today to answer that.
So let me start with, I heard the first two, architecture, security. What was the third?
I think it was
Shared services.
the opportunity around the ability to have a more consolidated platform.
I'm with you. So on the architecture, very candidly, we haven't chosen one yet. It's just not a decision that's been made. We have so many options in front of us. We want to complete the RFI process to make sure that we've asked all the right questions, we've harvested all the right information, and then that'll kind of drive a choice of architecture. I think there's some things that I impute that are obvious. Congress gave us $7 billion in two pieces, $2 billion right up front and $5 billion that'll come out of incentive auctions for spectrum. So we have to count on $2 billion to start with, 5 coming. And if you started laying fiber at the Atlantic coast and headed for California, and you laid fiber and built towers, we'd be out of that $7 billion before we hit the Mississippi. I think the likelihood that everything gets built from the ground up is zero. So it's going to boil down to, how do we have shared, how do we find existing infrastructure and partners that want to share everything from towers to backhaul to whatever? I think that's a piece. While we haven't chosen an architecture, I think partners are an obvious outcome of that choice. And then at the security level, I think we will have one security approach that will be consistent with probably DOD / the federal government, but a single security level. That hasn't been picked yet either, but that's what we know today.
I understand that, and I think it's important here at NASCIO that we embrace that going forward. You know, we have an enterprise architecture committee. As a former enterprise architect and a CISO, you know, I'm seeing this and I'm hoping that we can capture our best practices moving forward, and maybe we can save money. I recognize from a technical standpoint the architecture is a problem, but a mindset around both how we're going to use the data, how we use existing, how do we maximize and benefit from the existing infrastructure towards a shared capacity is where I'm going with this, and I think it's a great opportunity.
That makes sense. You know, one last point on that is Brenda raised the issue of, you know, public safety. There'll be other users. So let's be clear about this. This will not just be people that wear badges that use this network. And FirstNet is not, repeat, not going to tell you who public safety is. You will make the decision at your level whether utilities are part of public safety or whether the Department of Transportation or Health and Human Services is part of public safety for purposes of network usage. We're not going to tell you who public safety is. In fact, here's our rule on it. You're going to tell us who public safety is, and if you say they're public safety, then that's fine with us.
And I also think the way that it's being set up is there is a Public Safety Advisory Committee, and part of there's many members on that committee, and the main purpose of that is to look at things like requirements, looking at things like architecture, looking at things that have already been put into place, has been established, for an understanding of how the network needs to operate and who they need to be able to accommodate. And that's part of collecting those requirements, collecting those architectures from the states so that it is very clear, as the chief has said, how this is going to exist going forward, and that we do address security issues, that we do address shared services, and do things in the best possible way that will be able to accommodate every particular state and how they operate.
Okay, we got Mr. Clark.
Daryl, let's talk a little bit about tribes. You know, the big square states out west, they all have tribes. They have a lot of land involved. And frankly, some of them are the most economically disadvantaged. And they're really not a good economic model around putting anything up in there with that much technology. How's FirstNet going to address the tribes in the western states or any other state? And how do they deal with the sovereign nation issue?
It's an excellent question, and it's not one I have a pleasant answer for. You know, my style is I'm profoundly candid, and the truth is the truth, right? The law says that tribes will be dealt with as part of the state process. That's what the law says. And the tribes, and I think rightfully so, are offended that as a sovereign nation, they have to deal with FirstNet as part of a state process, and we constantly hear that feedback. All I can say is I recognize what the law says, and FirstNet doesn't have a choice around it. So the way CIOs can help us is that as you spin up your state process, please include your tribes. I know the difficulties. There's 56 states, territories, and commonwealths. There's 566 tribes that are federally recognized, 90% of them west of the Mississippi, 40% in Alaska alone. There are many states, there are many tribes there's actually a tribe, I think it's Fort Mojave, that covers Idaho, Nevada, California, and maybe a piece of Utah. So I recognize the difficulty of even saying it's got to come through the state process, because many tribes have to pick a state because they cover many states. So I just want to say we have assigned Kevin McGinnis, who is a board member. who is leading our tribal effort. We will hire a tribal member for our staff to lead our tribal outreach effort. But I'm sad to say that the law is less than perfect in terms of recognizing sovereignty in a fashion that would make tribes happy.
Hey, Darryl. So I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the cost, because that was the largest response back. So when by state will I have the cost and the sustainability costs in my hands?
It's the cost question, the business model.
So the short answer to the cost question is, and you need to make a note here, we don't know. We do know this. We know that you're not required to buy FirstNet services. We know that the law requires us to build a self-sustaining business model, which means when the $7 billion runs out, do the fees we charge perpetuate the ongoing improvement of the network, its operation, maintenance, et cetera, et cetera. Our business plan has got to do those things. So here's the price we're going to charge. FirstNet must bring a price of deployment and therefore a price for membership that you find attractive. If we don't, you won't choose it. If you don't choose it, we've failed. So we believe that the price point is going to have to be at or below what you're currently paying for commercial wireless services, and then bring to the table the added benefit of being a mission-critical network dedicated to public safety. So we don't know precisely what the price will be. We know it has to be sustainable, and we know it has to be at or below what you're currently paying.
So I can't opt out.
But you don't have to choose it. So you can opt out, which means build your own, but you don't have to choose it. So you could opt in, you could opt out and build your own and run the thing the way you want to run it. But if you opt in, you don't have to buy a single subscription service. We've got to make the value proposition to you, or we've failed in our mission.
But also, in addition to that, just to enhance a little bit, that will be known at the time that your state plan is presented to you. So you will have that information when it is presented to you to understand what that financial model is. And that will also be what you will make your decision on as you go forward if you go through this opt-out process, because you will be expected to provide the same services, the same level of service that FirstNet is proposing, and generally you have to have you will have to have a cost model for your state also on how that's going to work.
It's an excellent point. You know, if there's one nugget for the CIO to take back to your state, it's this question. Does, in your state, territory, or commonwealth, your governor have the statutory authority to sign the document that FirstNet drops on their desk? Because this is not a legislative question, it goes to the governor. And remember the choices, right? Opt-in means the governor says yes and signs it. Opt-2, the governor doesn't say anything, which means yes. Or 3, the opt-out scenario. So if the governor doesn't have the authority and can't say anything, then you're in. I think it's an important question to ensure your governor has the statutory authority when it comes time, because based on legislative cycles, this might hit the desk at the wrong time to ask the question of the legislature. So one of the things we're asking each state is, please now go back and make sure that the governor's got what they need to do to deal with this issue when it comes to your state.
If you're going to have the same governor. That's the other issue I think FirstNet's got to be very cognizant of, is that we may not be dealing with the same governor at that point. Can I ask, I'd like to ask a question that kind of jumps off the question here, and I know I'm supposed to be up here answering questions, but this one is one that is, I think, something we need to all think about, and it's going to be something as you come to our states, we're going to want to have that discussion. If we are silent or opt in, we make that decision. You have said the state and the locals do not have to buy anything. I mean, we're not, when we opt in and or we're becoming part of FirstNet by keeping our mouths shut, we're still in. Then you made a statement that made me think of the question of, and the state then takes over the responsibility of assigning levels of authority and that sort of thing. If I opt in out of silence and none of my locals are able to afford or decide they do not want to be part of FirstNet, will the state have additional costs by having to still manage the piece of FirstNet that landed in their state?
Well, that's a great question. I'm going to start off by saying I don't definitively know the answer to that.
Okay.
I think that scenario would mean we really blew it at FirstNet if the states and the locals don't select the service, right? We'll have missed the target by a pretty wide margin. But I would say, I would say there's going to have to be some default priority setting process for in the event that people just completely check out of that process. And yes, I think that given the choice, I'm going to put on my I was in the state hat on for a minute. If I'm given a default approach, or I can engage my local partners and we can alter that in a way that suits us best, then that's probably going to be our preferred model. But at the end of the day, if nobody's using it, the priorities don't matter.
I think Dugan had a question.
But
It's a
we
good
had one
question.
to the left of the House, and then Dugan, if that's
I'm going to
okay.
make a note of that.
Want to respect the gentleman who's been standing up for some time.
I guess not to keep beating the opt-in, opt-out horse there, but we've seen recently with the affordable health care health exchanges where you have states that not only want to opt out, but almost violently want to opt out for whatever reason, whether it be cost or politics, or whatever it be. There has been, you know, and as a vendor, we talked to a few different states here and there, and some are wanting to embrace it. Some are saying, you know, no, we don't think it's going to work for whatever reason. So what happens when you meet up with a governor that says, no, we not only we want to opt out, but we want to have nothing to do with it. We will stop your installation trucks as they hit our state borders.
Oh, that's a great question. So I have heard that question, and I think first, FirstNet is going to pop up a wireless umbrella over every state, no matter what. I mean, Congress has said we're going to build a nationwide network over 56 states, tribes, or territories and commonwealths. So that's what's going to happen. If you say yes or you say nothing, that's going to happen. And if you say we're out, then you're going to do it to FirstNet standards. I mean, that's just the way it is. So, and because we're very likely, I think it's an impractical, the whole notion of stopping FirstNet trucks at the border, I think that's an impractical perspective, because we're very likely to be leveraging existing towers, infrastructure, and backhaul. So I don't think spotting FirstNet will be very easy to start with. Second, there's a satellite layer, which is going to be there. I just think that's kind of an impractical approach. It seems illogical to me. I mean, unlike you know, healthcare, there's no requirement that you pay anything or belong. So to violently react to that level seems illogical to me and impractical to me, since there's no expectation you spend a cent on it. And since all it could do is potentially add to the capability of first responders, I think when we move away from the genesis of this and we move toward implementation, I think in those very few areas that are talking like that, I think it'll become a more rational and reasoned discussion. I'm optimistic. I think in every major change I've been part of in my life, There's always this component early, and I think as long as people are rational and there's no requirement to spend your money, I think cooler heads will prevail. I want to believe that.
Yeah, and I would say, I would echo that and say the difference, I think, between FirstNet and some of these other federal programs is there is no matching requirement, there is no associated impact with the state. So most of the time I would, as I go to states and hear some of these questions, and they say, I'm absolutely going to opt out. And to echo the chief's statement, I always say, what are you going to opt out of? Suppose, just suppose for a minute, that somebody came to you and said, I'm going to build you a network in your state with absolutely no cost. It's going to be the best thing you've ever seen. It's going to give you more capabilities than you've ever had, and I'm going to do it for zero cost. You're going to refuse that? Is that really what you want to do? Because you haven't heard the chief's pitch yet. So if he goes in and says, this is what we're going to do, then you can make your decision about whether or not you're going to bar the borders and not let anybody into your state. Look at what this service is, what it's going to provide, and what is the impact to the state. And generally, what FirstNet is trying to do is say that there would be very little to no impact to the state. Financially.
Chief Johnson, you said there were 3 choices, and I guess I wonder if actually there's a variation of that, and it goes back to the tribal question. I understand that's a difficult question, but it seems to me for states to get prepared for the governor to have the authority to sign and opt in, statute could take place. It could bring state and local governments together, and they could do that. The representation for the sovereign nations, to the tribe, is really a difficult issue because I think arguably the governor simply doesn't have the authority to move them in.
That's right.
So is one of the options an opt-in for state and local government, and to Brenda's point, some silence around the tribal organization? Does that avoid the question? I know it's a tough area.
Excellent question, Dugan. So let's talk about this. I'm going to put this in the answer to this in the context of Oregon, which Dugan and I know well. There's the Warm Springs tribe in Oregon that you know, they don't even have the most basic cell service, broadband service, and their land mobile radio service is limited. And this is repeated throughout our country as you get into tribal lands. So the state will make the opt-in, opt-out decision, and that will be that. And if they opt in, FirstNet's responsible to pop up that umbrella over the entire state and to cover to some degree, right, or 100% or whatever, to cover to whatever degree our deployment plan calls for the tribal nations, and that boundary will be invisible. I would say this, though. Some of the tribes, and Warm Springs in particular, and the Fort Mojave is another tribe, they're really out on the front end saying, hey, I've got an idea. Now, I'm not saying some of these ideas are sticking to the wall, but I'm saying this is the kind of thinking that gets traction. Warm Springs essentially said, hey, there's tribal communications money. What, FirstNet, what if we get some of that money and we build towers at places that you say? Then when FirstNet comes to Warm Springs, we'll hang your radios on it. We'll use your spectrum, and the network partners that you adopt will be us. We'll use your spectrum for local broadband and cellular phone communications, and knowing that we can preempt that, it'll be invisible to us, but we can preempt that at a moment's notice. But we could use that spectrum. You could use our towers, and that'll be the partnership arrangement. I get cell service and broadband in tribal areas. You get public safety capability. We've leveraged some of this tribal money we get elsewhere. I mean, so what we said to that is, let us think about it. Those are the kind of ideas, I think, that tribes have an opportunity to bring forward because so much of their land is rural and they are so underserved as a proportion that I think those are some ideas that need to be floated at the state level. And when FirstNet engages at the state level, we're hoping to hear those kinds of ideas come from the tribes in that state process. Today we're hearing it directly. Dugan, I know I missed the answer, but it's a shot.
Okay, got one.
Aldona Valicenti from CGI, and actually a recovering CIO.
God bless you.
Because we never recover, I think. But one of the things that I did, by the way, you've done a good job of explaining what is coming. But what I did not hear is any discussion of the involvement of the National Governors Association.
That's an excellent.
What are they messaging? What are they telling their governors?
So that's a great question. Thank you for asking. When we passed the original legislation on the Hill, every public safety association in the United States was in support of this. Not only were they, but so was Heather Hogsett and the National Governors Association, and they brought their president and their leadership to the Hill to help us with this. Heather is a vice chair of the Public Safety Advisory Committee, part of the executive committee there. We just engaged NGA as the contractor to help us do our 7-state regional meetings. I just met with Tom McClellan last week, as a matter of fact, in New Jersey. We are plugged in with NGA. We continue to have dialogue with their staff and their board through their staff. I think with all the associations, this is true of NGA and everybody else, we could do a better job. Candidly, if we had more employees by this point, we would be doing a better job. We know it's important. We're spread pretty thin. I hope we'll continue to expand on that as we grow in capability.
And one quick pitch, because this is being run through the state and through the governor's office, it was determined that the governor needs to designate the point of contact on these SLIG-P grants, and that's how it's going to be communicated and coordinated with for each of the states. That comes out of the governor's office, and so we sort of, I think the legislation was intended so that the governors would be informed and the point of contact would be that mechanism so that the governor can be informed, because there's things that are going to be coming, i.e. there's going to be a plan put on the governor's desk and the governor will have to make a decision. So this is the governor's office, NGA is very, very important because of the decisions that they have to make.
Okay, the clock is up, so we're going to make this the lightning round. Last question, and then we'll, because we don't want to cut too far into your break, Sonny.
First of all, thank you for everything that you're doing. I think we need to recognize first that this is too important a program, a national program, at the national level and state level and local level, for it not to succeed. We have to succeed. So I think, thank you, first of all. And the conversation has started, and I think you've done a great job in starting the conversation. And the conversation is a two-way conversation. We need to also come in. So how can we help? How can we help at the state level? And how can we help with industry as well? I mean, there's chemical manufacturing, there's electric, all of these things are part of the grid. And we also know the adversary can turn things on and off remotely if they want to. So could you mind talking a little bit about how can we help at the state level, industry level, and also from other considerations such as security?
Thanks, Sonny. It's a great question. I think the first thing you can do is proactively engage us if you have any questions or concerns. And Sonny, you and your team have been doing that, right? We've had a running conversation. I think that's the first thing I would do. The second thing is that will drive us being aware of issues that concern you and issues that you care about. And that will drive where we put our attention. Also, there are some states that have very unique challenges. Alaska was great, right? Alaska, Hawaii, and Saipan were great in the regional meetings. They're like, okay, we're not Connecticut. There are parts of Alaska where our troopers patrol on dog sleds, and they leave for 3 days and come back. If they come back, we go, oh, good. There's no way to talk to them, and satellites don't fly around that end of the world. So they're essentially saying, what's your plan there? Answer, we didn't, well, okay, we didn't know that. Thanks. Hawaii and Saipan, very challenging communications when you're offshore, and there's no place to put towers. So now we're back to the satellite layer and starting to think about that in a different context. The more we understand your state and your needs, the more we have a glimpse of that, the better job we're going to do. So I say, Sonny, start the dialogue, open up lines of communication. Regardless of how pleasant or unpleasant the question is, ask it of us. We've got thick skin. We just want to do this right. And we want to be successful. So just lay it out. That's why I love the, what if we deploy the National Guard at the border question? Because that stuff helps us think through those kinds of questions and challenges. That's the best thing, Sonny. And then the other thing, make sure your governor can sign it or not. Yeah.
And I'll just put in a quick other plug to go sideways as CIOs, and that is to coordinate with all of your locals, tribals, cities, counties, within your jurisdiction, within your state. I think that's going to be a challenge for you folks. I know that in some states they're very well organized. In some states, they haven't had a conversation with a city or a county in maybe ever. And they're all involved. They're all going to participate. They all have a stake in this, and it's all important to every one of those folks. I think that will be a huge organizational challenge for each of the states and territories. But it is vitally important, and that will really, really, really help FirstNet if you have a good understanding, and that's part of what the grant funding's for, is to have meetings, to have training sessions, to assemble those folks so that you can have that communication. And I think that is almost as critical as presenting those requirements to the FirstNet folks.
Well, I think a perfect question and perfect summary is given the topic of the discussion. Brindog, basically that's a good close. I don't know if you want to add a few words before we break.
The only thing I'd remind you is NASCIO has a working group that deals with FirstNet. I'm assuming right now Daryl is the chair of that, and I am assuming that will continue under Craig. So keep involved with NASCIO as well. We're using that as a conduit to get back to FirstNet and get back to the PSAC committee.
All right, well, let's give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you very much for being here. And thank Craig.